as soon as it looks like everyone's in the room, we'll get started. All right, well, welcome to our first GLAM event of 2025. And GLAM stands for Government Libraries, Archives, and Museums, and it's the start of a virtual job festival that culminates on February 28th. I'm Becca Cabasa, and I work at the Emporia State University School of Library and Information Management. And it's my pleasure to host our panel today, which is on alternative career paths for librarians. In a minute, I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we will go through some questions that we've prepared. And then at the end, there will hopefully be enough time for any questions you may have. So feel free to pop any questions that come up in your minds in the chat, and we'll try to address those. And I just want to thank you all for giving us an hour of your time. So we're going to go in alphabetical order, and I'm going to invite Dan Bostrom to introduce himself first.
All right. Thank you, Becca. And thank you all for coming. Great attendance, great turnout today. I really appreciate it. So yeah, my name is Dan Bostrom. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at the Reaching Across Illinois Library System, which is sometimes called RAILS, located in Burr Ridge, Illinois, in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. It is a multi-type library system, so we serve public, school, academic, and specialized libraries, about 1,200 total libraries in our system. Before I worked at Rails, I worked at the American Library Association. I worked for the Association for Library Service to Children, which is called ALSC, which is a division of ALA. I have a master's in library and information science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I also have a master's of business administration from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and I'm a Wisconsin native. I live here in the Chicago suburbs, and very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. All right, I'm going to invite Patty Devery to introduce herself next.
Hey everybody, I'm Patty Devery. I'm the Associate Director of the Archive at StoryCorps. StoryCorps, if you are an NPR listener, is an oral history project started by Dave Isay, and we broadcast pieces weekly on Morning Edition, sometimes on Weekend Edition, but I and my archivists manage our large, let me emphasize, large collection of interviews. We have over 90,000 interviews recorded by StoryCorps and over 350,000 interviews. That includes user-uploaded interviews. It's a large, complex collection. I have my master's in library science from Queens College, part of the CUNY system, and a certificate in archives and cultural preservation. And I am also from the Chicago area, so I have Dan and I were chatting about that before the session, and I'm excited to chat with you all today.
All right, and I'm going to invite Cindy Larson to introduce herself.
Great. Thanks, Becca. And let's just say that like StoryCorps is the coolest thing here. So I'm going to try and live up to that. But, you know, StoryCorps is the coolest thing here. Meanwhile, I'm Cindy Larson. I'm currently product manager at the Crisis Prevention Institute in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm also a graduate of the UWM School of Library and Information Science. Of course, we called it Library and Information Science then. I think they call it Information Science now. And I've had a 25-year non-traditional career in libraries, but not really actually in libraries, but always in digital product. So I started off as an undergraduate in Madison, getting a degree in English, and I was tired of playing piano for ballet classes and walked into some open interviews at the library school in Madison, and it turned out that they were building a relational database of the public libraries in Wisconsin. And I didn't know it then, but I know it now. Relational databases and making information move from one place to the other is the most exciting thing on the planet, except for maybe StoryCorps. So I've always worked in and on some kind of digital product, from integrated library systems to intranets to content management systems to .coms and .orgs, to building custom software to customer relationship management systems, but always in the middle of a big, glorious, messy product. And sticking with our Chicago theme, previous to my current job, I was working for a small digital marketing and software development agency based out of Chicago, but I live here in Milwaukee. It's nice here. So I think we're going to talk a lot more about some other things. So I'll leave it there, Becca.
Perfect. That sounds great. So what we're going to do now is we've come up with some questions that I'm going to pose, and then I'm going to offer each of our panelists a chance to answer them. My thought is that we'll offer one person the chance first, and then with the next question, it'll be another person a chance to answer first. And so the first question, which I'm going to pose to Dan, and then let Patty and Cindy answer as well, is what skills and experiences should I obtain to be competitive on the job market?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I honestly, I think that this is largely, it's difficult because it depends on what you bring, what you already have, right? What you already bring. So my skills before I got into MLS, before I got into the library career, were largely marketing skills. I had worked at a small marketing firm. I had done a lot of writing in college. I wrote for the college newsletter. I worked on the college literary journal, all this kind of stuff. So I already brought in like copywriting and things like that. One thing I would suggest to a lot of folks out there, and I know this is kind of a buzzy term, but project management, just simple project management skills, I think are really, really useful to bring into any competitive job market. So if you can tell an employer, I created the idea for this project. I, brought people in. I was able to foster, the design, stage and got it all the way to completion. If you can show a potential employer all, how you did that and all like the number of steps that you did it, I think that's really, really, I think that's really impressive. One thing that I think is sort of like underrated in a weird skill, but actually it's come up in my job a lot, is event planning. There is no like library, there's no like degree for event planning. But if you're going to get into libraries, a lot of programming jobs, is basically event planning. I came through the association world, so I worked at the American Library Association and I've worked at other associations, and planning big conferences and big events is a big part of what you end up doing. And so, and I think, again, there's no like school or classes you can get for this, but I think that those are really good things to have. And, again, that might not be part of your current job, but there's a lot of ways that you can do that without, having to be associated with a job sort of. So those are the project management and event planning are kind of two things that I think are pretty useful.
All right, Patty, any thoughts?
I was also going to say project management. I sort of slid into my job because of good timing. I started full-time at StoryCorps day one of the New York City lockdown of COVID-19 in 2020. And I had just graduated with my MLS the previous semester in that December. I had been working part-time at StoryCorps. And my previous job experience was a lot of administrative work. And some database work that I didn't realize was like metadata until I went to school for it. But I came in hearing all of these ways of project management, Gantt charts and RACI charts, and I didn't know what that meant. And we've gone through a couple of hiring cycles for archivists, and having been in the job, project management is a big part of it that I didn't understand, especially when you're an archive embedded in a larger organization, when the gig isn't the archive itself, but we're part of a very complex organization. And then I was also going to say, related to libraries and databases, query language, not necessarily coding, but SQL and Python. I don't honestly know enough of that, and I've been able to hire some archivists who do. So that's been great. That's something that sort of you know, we have people that come in and say, I can learn anything. And I believe that. And I believe that's true, especially of information professionals. But when you have someone who knows it a bit already, they don't have to learn it, right? They're not starting from jump. So I believe in us and I trust that we can all learn things. But if you learn a little bit ahead of time, you're setting yourself a little bit farther ahead of the game.
Right, Cindy?
Yeah, totally agree with Dan on that project management and event management. It's all about the details and understanding how work actually gets done. And when you understand that, right, then you can actually get work done. Also, really want to build on what Patty said, because you're talking to a generation of people whose core industry was massively disrupted by the internet, right? Like when I was in graduate school, I thought UWM was the coolest thing ever because they were teaching an HTML class, guys, right? Like that was amazing, right? They taught us what TCP/IP was and how computers actually connected to the internet. So as we approach digital product, we really had to have an understanding of what are we building and who are we building it for and how are they going to use it, right? So my advice, in addition to understanding how work gets done and having some basics of that tech, is understand how your information, whatever you're managing, is stored and then retrieved, right? So if you're managing an integrated library system, understand how that backend database stores that record, right? It's super important to know the difference between a serial versus a monograph. Look at me with real librarian words. The part that goes along with how your information is stored is have some empathy for your user, right? What are they actually trying to accomplish, right? Are they trying to schedule an appointment with their doctor? Are they trying to check out a book? Are they just trying to get a stinking audiobook so their drive to Dubuque this weekend is a little bit more entertaining than a January, February drive from Milwaukee to Dubuque might be, right? So really try and understand that user, and that can be UX, that can be user stories, but understand how you can build that understanding. And then finally, the best piece of career advice I ever got is, Cindy, you have to listen, right? You have to listen and you have to make sure you understood what was said and wasn't said. And if that means you have to repeat it back to make sure you heard it correctly, do that. That's what I would add there.
Thank you. Those are all great. So this one I'm really excited about because I'm really curious. And what job duties and roles does your current position include? And we're going to start with Patty on this one.
Sure. As I said, I'm the associate director of the archive at StoryCorps. My department's main duty is to process all the interviews that StoryCorps records. Pretty standard archival stuff, check files for corruption and file names, and check the databasing, descriptive work, and process those interviews into our archive. That's sort of the fundamentals. Part of the descriptive work, however, is that we train our facilitators to do that descriptive work. They are not librarians. They are not archival professionals. This has really helped me do that part that can be difficult and learn how to explain the importance of descriptive work to non-professionals, non-industry people, from the people that are ending up doing the work all the way up to our exec team who ask why we need a 2-week training for this kind of work. And I'm lucky, the StoryCorps is very supportive, but exec always asks questions. So it's always good to have the answers. We also, I was excited to institute, because we had an office downsizing, an institutional archive. So everybody was clearing out their desks and I said, bring me all your stuff. Here's what I'm looking for. And some people gave me what I was looking for and some people gave me everything. So we're still working through that. So a little bit of a more traditional archive there. It's an organizational archive, but we had a 20-year reunion 2 years ago, or I'm sorry, anniversary. So that was exciting. We had all those materials that we could then pull for some displays and for our gala. We also, like I said, project management, as we were just talking about, a thing that I didn't necessarily anticipate being part of my job. I'm working on creating a delivery mechanism through our online archive that will allow our archive partners to access their collection through our online archive instead of a Dropbox folder of files and an Excel sheet, which is how we currently deliver them. So it's more of an access point for their participants, as well as an easier way for smaller institutions to engage with those materials instead of us sending, you know, a large cumbersome folder full of WAV files to them.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Cindy, would you mind?
Sure. So I love this question because it's the super professional version of, but what do you do all day long, right? It's my favorite thing ever because sometimes I leave my desk and think, did I actually get anything done today? And you'll hear product managers the world around say that when you work on a digital product, did I sit through 8 hours worth of meetings to get nothing done? But fundamentally, the way I like to think about it is I am the glue that keeps the ball moving to get a product to market so that we can make money on it and measure the outcome and meet the need of the user, right? It's super simple, right? Did I get something out the door that helps someone somewhere manage a crisis and helps the Crisis Prevention Institute generate a profit to pay my salary, right? That's fundamentally what we're about. So since Patty gave such a nice detail, let me just take a moment and tell you what that actually looks like every day, right? For those of you at home who are actually really interested in digital product management. So the Crisis Prevention Institute has been around for 45 years. And what they do is they teach people the skills to manage those everyday crisis situations for the care, welfare, safety, and security for all involved. So picture a teacher who's got a student who has some needs and is escalating into a crisis, either verbal or physical. That teacher has to manage that situation to keep both the child, his or herself safe, as well as the classroom safe. So how can I verbally, or worst case scenario, physically help a crisis not occur or manage that crisis, right? And crises can, come to bear for many, many reasons, right? My sister is making me crazy. We have an argument. This student had a terrible morning and they have ADHD, right? And the unreasonable expectations once they get to school has them ready to throw a chair, right? So what I do all day long is for specialty topics that may have neurological, physical, biological impacts on behavior, how can we deliver materials to help build empathy and awareness to manage crisis situations for specialty populations, right? So that's the what Crisis Prevention Institute is doing and the why. What am I doing all day long, right? So the product I'm trying to get out the door right now is related to those challenging behaviors in children. And I have to make sure that our learning development team knows exactly what they're building and who they're building it for and help guide on the day-to-day content decisions. Do we include this condition, but not this condition because this one is neurological and this one isn't? This one is a response to trauma. Does that fit in this one or does it belong somewhere else? Then I have to work with the sales and marketing team to make sure that we have a viable go-to-market approach, a long enough runway, and a sell approach to ensure that we're going to hit our forecasted numbers. And then I have to track those numbers, right? So I can keep getting paid. I'm really motivated by getting paid, y'all, right? I also have to make sure that our training team can deliver this training to our certified instructors and our end learners, and they have the materials they need, as well as be sure that I'm listening because they're the feet on the street. So what are they hearing about our product already? I have to make sure we have measurement tools in place and work with the UX research team to ensure that I've got a place to measure, reasonable measures in place, and a dashboard to make it all happen. And then finally, I have to make sure that our systems team, right, so that we can both e-commerce sell our materials and take care of our customers where the call comes in and people can access the materials they should have access to. I have to make sure they understand the requirements of the program that I'm delivering so that they can have the systems and the tools and the processes to respond to deliver that. And sometimes all of those things are super, super easy because in project management, we would say it's a minor repeater, right? It's a 30-minute e-learning course. We've got a bunch of them already. It's no big deal. We're going to make this and turn it on. Sometimes it's really hard because we're blowing up the whole process, or you've only worked there for 4 months and you're still just figuring everything out. But fundamentally, I get to be the glue that sits in the middle of all of this, where all of these really, really smart people figure out what needs to be done so that my product can get to market. And I like to think of it as the best reason to be a librarian is you get to learn the answer and you don't ever have to apply the answer because all these smart people are actually going to do that work while I hold the team together.
Great.
So
That
we
was
did
a
have a hand.
fantastic explanation. And someone mentioned in the chat that is this going to be sent out to all participants, and this will be posted on the GLAM website, so you'll have access to this afterward. I don't know that we're sending it out to all participants, but you can definitely access this afterward. And then I see also that Erin Anderson raised her hand. Did you have a comment, Erin? All right. She says she must accidentally clicked it. Oh, fantastic. All right. So we're going to move on to Dan. I want to hear about your day today.
Yeah, and actually I like the way that Cindy sort of framed it. Like, you know, the big picture behind my job is, you know, it's basic communications theory, right? I have to be sort of the middle between the sender, you know, the person that has something to sort of disseminate, and then I have to figure out how to get it to the receiver. In a lot of ways. So, and this is something I actually, you know, learned a lot about in library school, and I would encourage you to go back and look at some of this stuff because, you know, I think about this a lot. You know, and so there are a lot of, you know, our membership, our library system, again, is a pretty big place. It's 27,000 square miles. It's 50 counties in Illinois. It's probably, we have a service population of probably around, there's like probably 8 million people living in the area that we serve. And so, you know, and my, you know, core population is the librarians and the people that work in those libraries. But within that, there's a lot of differences. So, you know, I might be communicating on any single day, I might be communicating to just public library directors in a specific county, or, you know, academic librarians in this part of the state or something like that. And so I have to figure out sort of what is the best channel to reach them, what's the best message. As you will find out in your career, academic librarians, school librarians, public librarians, they have different languages that they speak, in different ways of referring to things, in different ways of sort of referencing things. They also have very different structures to how they operate. So, you know, a school librarian reports up to you know, a principal, a superintendent, a school board. A public library director reports directly to a board. And so you have very different, in those, you have a lot of different nuances. And so, you know, again, the tools that I use are, you know, press releases, email newsletters, social media, print materials, conference exhibits, special projects, video, a lot of different things we use at Rails to sort of make sure that the message we have, we sort of understand what's important to our members. We're communicating them because they expect us to sort of communicate with them, especially when in the advent of an emergency, which some emergencies have popped up recently, I can tell you that much. And so, you know, I have to manage a team. I have to work with the team to sort of harness the message, figure out where it's going to go, who's it's intended for, measure it after it goes out so that we understand, did that message to get to who we need to get to, and then. The great thing is I work with a ton of different people who are really like talented in a lot of different areas. So I've got folks who are great writers, fantastic writers. I got people who are fantastic at doing video and audio. I've got someone who's basically like a web, you know, front-facing web developer on my team. And so we get to use all these different skills that people have to create packages which will catch people's eye, because that's difficult to do, and make sure that we're communicating correctly the information that we want to communicate to them. So that's my job.
Great, thanks so much. So the next question is, what is one thing you wish you have known about the job market before you started applying for jobs? And this one we're gonna let Cindy take first.
It's a great question. So I have sort of three headlines about this one. Learn how to talk about yourself, right? At the beginning of this session, Patty, Daniel, and I were asked to talk about ourselves in 4 minutes or less. And I have a 25-year career and a story to tell you about how I found my way to library science, right? It was a mistake, it was an accident, right? But learning how to tell you what I love doing, right? And how that's applicable to library science and how my skills have grown with each role and each digital product that I've touched is a really important story. And guys, it's hard, but it's not any harder than telling your best vacation story, right? You want to tell people where you went and why you went there and what the amazing thing that you did there was so that they go and do those things, right? With Dan's background in marketing and communications, he'd tell you to write a hook, right? So the way I talk about myself is I always say I'm a digital product owner. I always say I'm a digital product leader, but I also always say I'm a librarian because boy, does that make it more interesting, right? People want to ask you a question of, well, why the heck did you go to Prague in the middle of October instead of going to, right, Paris in April, right? Let them ask you a question about it, but know how to talk about yourself. It's the most important thing you need to know. And that will help you with my favorite interviewing tip, which is interviewing is more about listening than talking, right? Because you are going to hear people say some things when you're interviewing that you're going to think, oh my gosh, that person just talked about themselves for an hour. Why would I want to work for them? Or, oh my gosh, that person said horrible things like we work hard and we play hard, which to me always meant 12-hour days in the office and then 5 hours at a bar. And I never want to do that, right? I want to go to bed at 8 o'clock and read my book. But in that interviewing, work on those listening skills. And that can be, they've asked you a question, repeat that question back to them so that number one, you have time to think about how you're going to answer this. And number two, you can make sure you answer their whole 5-part question. Right? So that's my top line. Know how to talk about yourself, and interviewing is really about listening.
Fantastic. I'm going to turn it over to Dan now, and then we'll do Patty.
Yeah, this Cindy's answer to the that first one especially, I think, know how to talk about yourself. Like we're as a profession, I think we're kind of bad at that. And it's difficult to translate what librarianship is, and especially difficult to translate what librarianship is in a specialized environment. Really difficult, I think. So definitely do that. Mine is I don't necessarily have a great answer to this one, but mine is to continually learn, just to keep learning. Even if you find that job that you really, really like, you have to you have to find a way to keep learning, and that can be hard. Like you can kind of get into a groove and be like, this is going great, but you have to, like there are so many skills that you can pick up in your job by saying yes to things. And like I see this a lot, like when I'm thinking about applying for a job, or when I've seen job descriptions come up and that sort of thing, like a lot of times there are skills in there that I don't have, right? Or there are things that are listed, and I'm like, maybe that would be kind of cool to learn. And it can be just as easy as like asking your colleagues, like, hey, I know that you're really great at SQL or something like that. Like, hey, I know, could you just give me a few tips, that sort of thing? Or like, tell me where I can get started. Like, lean on your coworkers to help you with these things. You don't have to go back and get like a third degree. You don't have to spend 10 hours a week studying something. You can just ask your coworkers, like, hey, like, show me how to do this, or like, give me some tips on what this would entail. And I think that's just a good way to sort of help your career in the long run. You're creating better connections with your colleagues, and you're giving them a chance to kind of show their leadership in an area. So definitely, talk to your coworkers.
That's great advice. All right, Patty.
One thing that stood out to me is especially if we're talking about jobs outside of traditional librarianship, is the number of job titles. They're all over the place. They're wild. They're at organizations who don't fully understand what an archive or what a librarian does. So I would say, especially if you're setting up those kinds of searches that I know we all have, to ping your email, look at the job descriptions over the title and see if that helps. And then if you see, when you see maybe a pattern in the job title, then make a search for that job title. I'm a bad librarian and I don't have a source to cite right now, but I remember reading an article that for that kind of work, for data informatics or digital archives or preservation, there were like 1,000 job titles that someone had done, you know, a case study on. So that is the part that I wish I had known more about, that there's a little bit more work, unfortunately, for us to do, but we're really good at researching. So I think that you can put together a lot of different searches that will help you narrow down what you're looking for. And don't get hung up on those job titles. And also watch out for the jobs that are making you do more jobs than one job at a time.
Yeah.
Those
Hey,
sneaky.
Becca, can I build on something that Patty said? So
Please do.
100% on the jobs that are more than one job at a time, because that'll be like 7 jobs and it'll never change. But I want to go back to the word choices that Patty was talking about, right? Is it information retrieval or is it SEO, right? Is it system design or is it user experience design, right? Like, be modern. It's the same thing. Call it what it is. And I'll give you a throwback to these maybe a little bit older than you folks who are on the phone. When I was in library school, there was a huge discussion about, should we call it a library? Should we call it an information commons? Should we call it a knowledge something or other? And finally, someone said to me, there's 2,000 years of branding behind the word library. Call it what it is, right? So apply that, right? Call it what it is. If you are designing an information retrieval system and you're creating wireframes for that, we call that user experience. Call it what it is, and do your homework so that your skills are valued in the current market. So thanks for letting me add on there.
Yeah, anytime anybody wants to add on, feel free. So this next one is, how has membership or activism in professional associations, national, international, or regional, impacted your career and job satisfaction? And since these careers aren't maybe traditionally library, I'm curious about what sort of organizations you belong to as well. And we're going to start this one off with Dan.
Yeah, I'm glad I get to lead on this one because I'm a huge advocate for joining membership associations, and I'm a member of like 5 different membership associations. I'm currently on the national board of directors for the Special Libraries Association, SLA, and so I'd be happy to talk to anybody about this or about getting involved in local, national, international associations whenever you want. So I'm a member of my state association, ILA, the Illinois Library Association. I'm also a member of the School Library Association in my state, which is called ILE. It's the Association of the Association of Illinois School Library Educators. Got it. SLA, as I mentioned, I'm also an ALA member, and then I'm a member of something called the Association Forum, which is an association for association professionals. I hope you caught that. So anyways, again, I'm such a huge advocate for this because I think that if you don't have the skills for jobs that you're looking for or the jobs that you want later in life, this is a great sandbox for you to practice those things and to get those skills. When I talked about event planning, that's how I got my event planning skills. Is I worked in, is I helped out in associations. I volunteered for associations to plan events. I got people together. We did just networking events, happy hours, dine-arounds, that kind of thing. So I think it's a great opportunity for you to do that. Again, I think a lot of people sort of think to themselves, like, I don't have the money to get an ALA membership or to get an SLA membership. I totally understand that, but it's just like, I'll this is my pitch. It's a lot cheaper than like getting a third master's degree or getting a fourth master's degree. So like, consider it sort of an investment in your career. And I will also say that like, we're gonna talk about networking later, but a lot of people, I've known so many people that met their best friends through associations, and the reason that you meet those people is because they share the same values that you do. We're librarian values. They have the same degrees that you do largely. They do the same work that you do. They just do it in a different place. They have the same challenges every single day. They're thinking about library challenges, that sort of thing. And I know so many people because of my time at ALA, and my wife still works at ALA. I know so many people that have been roommates to the ALA annual conference for 30 years, right? And like, get every meal, and like, the only time during the year that they get together is at the ALA annual conference, and they, eat meals together and they see each other, and it's just like, it's such a nice story. Right. And it's like they met at a conference a long time ago. Now they're like 30 years later, they're like, we've done this every single year. So anyways, that's my sentimental pitch. But please contact me if you want to talk more about associations. I would love to.
All right, Patty.
Yeah, I have similar feelings for slightly different reasons, but as I mentioned, I graduated with my MLS in December of 2019 and started my job remotely, and had a handful of internships before that. But I didn't really have very many professional connections because of the isolation of working remotely for the first 2 years of my career, and slowly easing into these associations and conferences really helped me build a network that I didn't have because of that. And I know there are even more now online only programs. I know they existed before, and obviously COVID helped push a lot of them further along. So acknowledging, as Dan said, the cost, I'm lucky to have an organization that pays for my membership to SAA. And depending on the conference and if I'm presenting, that helps a lot. If you can present that, if you're at an organization that's hesitant to send you, having a reason to be there beyond what seems like a fun conference, and promoting the organization with an official, poster or part of a panel can do a lot to help your organization see the worth in those connections. It really helped me. I was able to go, I'm only a member of SAA, but I've been to SAA, which is the Society of American Archivists, if you don't know, but I've been to the EMEA conference, which is the Association of Moving Image Archivists, as well as ARSC, which is the Association of Sound Recorded Collections. I went to my second EMEA this year, and there were people there that I knew from the year before, and it felt like, oh, look, I have a network. I'm an archivist. I'm in this crew, like Dan was saying. My team won trivia this year. And apparently we beat a lot of Jeopardy people, so that was exciting. And that's like a thing that I'll have when I go back next year. I'll see if we can repeat our winning team. So socially, yes. Professionally, yes. There's great workshops, and you get to hear what's going on in the field, even if it's not necessarily applicable to the work that you do, or you don't know that it's applicable until you go back and you say, oh, wait, that thing that they were talking about sort of in a different way does apply to what we're working on right now. Also, I don't know, I can't get 4 master's degrees, and I just want to be in school all the time. So this fulfills that need in me.
Perfect. All right, Cindy.
You guys are so great. Sometimes I tell myself I should get an MBA, and then I think, no, you already have a master's degree. You don't have to do that anymore. So I haven't had the word librarian in my title since I left my first job out of library school. And I've had kind of a long, I guess maybe lonely career, right? Because I'm never sitting with the librarians. And what I found is when I was sitting with the librarians, it was so much fun to be with my people and to think about information management in just a totally different way than I usually did. So this is a long way of saying I don't have any current memberships. which I'm a little ashamed and embarrassed of in this moment, but let me just spin it for you, right? So early in my career, I did SLA, I did the ALA student to staff program while I was in library school, and I was hooked up with the fundraising chair, and I got to go to the front row seat of the Amy Tan talk, and it was wonderful. But I quickly realized that those places were the people that you could go to solve your day-to-day problems, right? Because if they didn't know how to do it, they probably had some ideas based on something that I've done before. If you find yourself maybe away from associations and organizations and miss the librarians a little bit, one of the things that I've been doing over the past, I think 5 to 10 years is a ton of volunteering with the master's degree program at UWM. I'm on the advisory committee for the degree. I work with a group of undergraduate students every semester who are in a digital product class and deliver a project to a client. I mentor them. It's wonderful. I hired one of those students. I'm maybe going to hire a second one of those students. And I'm also working with the Committee on Accreditation for the UWM's ALA accreditation. So it's a long way of saying, make sure that you stay connected to your people so that you're not lonely. Those people can help you solve those problems. And if it seems scary, I put this in the chat, go to the state level first, right? How scary can a group of Wisconsin health science librarians be, right? I was nervous, but it turned out they were really great.
I think this is a really perfect segue to one of the other questions that we wanted to get to today, which is the most difficult part of your job. And I'm going to start off with Cindy for this one, because this was one of the ones that she suggested for a question. And I think this is crucial to success.
Yeah, so in digital product, the most difficult part of my job is very often having to be the generalist in the room who has to synthesize and distill the problem statement, right? So technology, the tech group has shown up and says, this isn't possible. We can't solve for it this way. It's drawn wrong in the wireframes and designs, and content shows up and says, yes, but this is what the content actually needs us to do. This is the way the content is. And everybody is stuck with what's right in front of them. And I have to distill a problem statement, or even better, give them a design thinking statement of how might we, right? To shift the room from where we're stuck so that they can keep moving. And what this very often takes is so much listening, right? What is content really saying? Content is saying, this is the message I have to deliver. What is tech really saying? My system does this, not this. What is UX and design really saying? It'll be best for the user like this. So how we bring them together to problem solve when they're stuck is very often the hardest thing, because sometimes people are mad. Sometimes people are hungry and they're grouchy. Sometimes people spent so much time creating this gorgeous content that they're emotionally invested in it. So being the person in the room who says, we all want the same thing. I just want you to want to work on my product so we can get it out and make money and we can all get paid, right? Don't you want that too, right? So really being that influence to listen, make sure that they feel heard, and be able to analytically distill the question, right? To move the team forward it's a long way of saying, guys, make sure that you understand how to clearly state the problem, right? So that you can listen and say, this is the problem with my information. This is what my users want to do with it, right? How can we get there? So between that and a sometimes longer commute than I like, that would be the biggest problem.
All right, I'm gonna move back to Patty now.
Sure. Let's see, the most difficult part of my job, I think, is being a middleman with the interviews. We train the archivists, or we train the facilitators. I have my archivists, they are my direct reports. I have 2 of them, in case you're wondering. But the facilitators are not my staff. They are under other managers, and we train them to do the work and they're scheduled to record interviews, and part of their job is to provide the materials to us, as well as finish that databasing in a timely manner. We provide feedback to them, but we have no sort of quote unquote power over them. So there's a lot of negotiating with those schedules with the other managers. Sort of talking peer to peer has been very important because I'm not their direct supervisor. So coming from me, it may not mean as much as coming from their manager. As far as our archive, which is an online website, it's a public website, archive.storycorps.org. It's my archive, so to speak, but the digital team runs it and fixes it. And if there are issues with it, people come to me because it's the archive, and I'm that middleman to go to the digital team and say, hey, this website's acting funky. What's the deal with it? And then they'll say, oh, we knew something was wrong, forgot to tell you that something was happening, or we, deployed a new feature, and as often happens with websites, that messed everything up for some reason. But I think that kind of negotiating, that how can I help you get your work done so that I can get my work done, is probably one of the most difficult parts of my job.
Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah, actually, very similar to both Patty and Cindy. Is like my job involves a lot of working with my colleagues to distill a message down to its essence and the most digestible part for our audience. And sometimes we disagree. Sometimes we disagree on what that message should be. And having to say no sometimes when you don't feel like what the person is asking you to do it will be helpful or useful. And just being like, hey, I understand what you're trying to do. I don't think what you are asking to do is going to effectively work. And so but that's tricky. Also, I also have to be flexible in what I think will work, because sometimes what I think will work doesn't work. And I have to go back and rearrange my thoughts and my priorities and be like, okay, this is something I need to change about my approach in the future. Or, okay, we can start doing this more often, this is a channel or a message or an opportunity that will work for us in the future. So it's being flexible, at trying to get flexibility from other colleagues. I mean, it's the people part of librarianship, right? Is taking the information, but then also realizing the information has a people side of it, as an aspect to it that you can't always manage. So.
Great. Thank you all for your answers to that. I'd like to combine a couple of questions that we had on our list so that we have time for a couple of the great questions that have come in on the chat. And so the one I'd like to combine is, how do you find a mentor, and the importance of networking? So I'd just like your thoughts on the importance of networking, mentorship seeking. Let's start off with Patty for this one.
Yeah, I did mention, as far as networking, I really have found the associations to be super helpful, especially having been fairly isolated. My supervisor and I were talking about some problem, and I can't remember what it was, but she was like, do you know anyone with this? These specialties? And I was like, Virginia, I don't know anyone. Like, I know my fellow grad students who also graduated with me and are struggling to find work. So now I can answer that question with the person. And in that line, I have found mentorship with my direct supervisors. I've been very lucky in that regard. For both librarianship and working at StoryCorps, my supervisor, Virginia Millington, has been with the organization for a long time. So institutionally, she's knowledgeable. She's also been in the field for about that same length of time. And a previous supervisor that I had at StoryCorps who came into the position and then moved on. But I still keep in touch with her. And so I would say also look around you. That's not always the case, but don't be afraid of using a supervisor as a mentor.
All right, Cindy.
A boss said to me once, it's an asker's world, right? You have to be willing to ask for help. It's something I'm still working on, right? You have to be willing to ask for help. But, you know, my friends Julie and Chad over at UWM asked me to do this panel, and I said yes, right? Students that I mentor through the official program, I always say to them, ask me, I will help you. I will meet you for coffee. I will look at your resume. And guys, I genuinely mean those things. If you're on this panel, connect with me on LinkedIn, right? If you're attending this panel, connect with me on LinkedIn. And we were laughing before this because like nobody actually wants to do it because you feel like you're asking somebody for something. But you know, I think it's amazing that there's still people who want to be librarians, right? And have real, actual librarian jobs or do the work and figure out, okay, these real, actual librarian jobs are amazing, but boy, this gets me a little bit more excited over here. So it's so important to know yourself so that you can talk about yourself. And when you're networking, boy, what do people love? People love to talk about themselves, right? And if you know yourself and you know what you like, you might know what you might want to ask other people, right? And when I don't know what to ask them, I say, what are you reading right now? And most people really like to talk about that. And if they aren't reading anything, they tell you about a great podcast. So you just have to be a little brave, which I know is hard, and a little curious. And I know you'll never believe it from this panel. But I'm the type of extrovert who just wants to know about you and don't really want to tell you about me. That little blend of an extrovert introvert. But just ask. I can't imagine saying no to a student who really wants to figure out next steps and is just terrified to talk to a grown-up, right? Because most of the time I don't feel like a grown-up. So that's what I got for you.
All right, Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah, the finding the mentor part is hard. It's like finding like romantic life partner. You know, it's like it's difficult, it's tricky. You got to put yourself. And then Cindy was talking about basically putting yourself out there, and I think I really think that that's true. Like I feel like I've lucked into some great mentors, but how did I get those people? I couldn't really tell you, honestly. As far as the networking go, I want to like acknowledge first of all that like some people feel like they are bad at in-person networking, and I totally understand that. I had a colleague recently tell me that she much prefers like online networking. She has built a like really solid friendship base over email, chat, message board forums, that sort of thing, and people that share her values. And I, you know what? That's great. That's networking too. And I think you should not. People shouldn't you shouldn't underappreciate that, especially if you are attending an MLS program in a in an isolated place, right? If you don't have the opportunities to go to networking events in your city or meet with other librarians, that's a privilege a lot of us have. Some people don't have that. So if you got to find a network, you got to find sort of a mentor in whatever area you can. And sometimes it just means you have to try a little bit harder in those non-traditional communication channels, basically.
All right, so we have a couple of questions that have come in on the chat. And what I'd like to do is read the question and let whichever panelist would like to respond to it, respond. And then we'll move on to the next question so that we can answer more. So this one is, I was wondering, after you're completing your education, when did you feel comfortable and knowledgeable in your careers and professions? As a current library student, there is so much to learn. Who wants to take it? Patty's got it.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, again, being the kind of people that we are that seek out these programs, I think always knowing that there is more to learn is a huge asset. Never feel bad about that. I think the closest I came was onboarding one of my supervisors, like as the supervisee, being the one with some of the knowledge. Where she was a metadata expert and had years of experience that I didn't have. The specifics that I knew, and the way she treated me as knowledgeable really helped me feel like I wasn't just, telling my boss what to do. And that was very helpful. But we have a a big file migration coming up, and I've never done that before. So that's a big daunting task that I learned about in school, but I haven't, applied anywhere. That is a new notch on my belt that I'll be able to bring into StoryCorps for the next file migration or into another organization if I were to go somewhere else. So again, that's an asset to always feel like you need to be learning more.
And then the next question is, do you feel that starting a GLAM career by taking an alternative path could cause barriers or opportunities to shifting your career into traditional paths?
Becca, I'll take this one. And I'll tell you guys a little bit of background. So in May, I left my previous position and I took 14 weeks off over the summer to kind of figure out a few life things that were happening and decide what to do next, right? So I'd spent this like 25-year career of alternative path, right? And I did the thinking through of, okay, well, like if I wanted to go work at the reference desk at my local public library, what does that path look like for me? And guys, it's no different than any other career change. I'm going to bring really unique skills to that position. I'm going to have to dust off some really old skills that I have some basics for, right? And so I would just need a planful approach to go do that, right? It's no different than, oh, okay, this is how an integrated library system works. Cool. This is how a content management system works. And this is how Microsoft SharePoint stores data and information. And this is how a CRM works. They're all fundamentally doing the same thing, just a little bit differently. So I don't think it slows you down, but you will be making a change and you just have to plan for that change.
Oh, that's fantastic. I feel like we could be here for another hour asking questions and seeking answers. But I want to be mindful of everyone's time today. And I want to thank our panelists for being here. I want to invite them if they have any 1 minute thought, or not even 1 minute, like 10 to 20-second last thoughts before we sign off.
Yep. Connect with me on LinkedIn, guys. I would love to connect with you for a 30-minute conversation, right? It might take us a couple weeks to schedule, but guys, it's an asker's world.
Yeah, same. And I'm going to put my email into the chat if anybody ever wants to email with questions.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll just say, add your story to the StoryCorps archive, archive.storycorps.org.
Perfect. Oh, it was so delightful to meet you all. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks,
everybody.
Becca.